It is time for the best and worst horror films of 2019. Brought to you by me, Chuckloaf, of the 1200 Films podcast. All horror, all the time. We will be discussing the top 10 films that I have chose for this year. The top 5 honorable mentions, plus several that didn't quite make it. My guilty pleasure of the year, and the 5 worst films of the year. I had never attacked horror like I did this year, primarily because of the podcast. To my count, I watched 56 horror films that specifically came out just this year. Probably 12 in the last 7 days. It's been a mad rush of final films, trying to squeeze everything in. There's still a couple that I didn't get to, which I'm sad about. But I'd still say that's pretty good and still worthy of a respectable list. So without too much further ado, let's get going. Here we go with the top 5 worst films in horror of 2019. Up until about 4 days ago, honestly, I was struggling to find 5 bad films to discuss on this show. But thankfully, 2 popped up real late. And they're not just the worst films of this year, they're probably in my top 10 worst films of all time. And we will be getting to those later. But let's start with number 5, Hell House LLC Part 3. First Hell House, great. Second Hell House was okay. Then they made a third one. And all they did was regurgitate characters and scenes and clips from the older ones and tried to recreate it one more time, squeeze out one last little drop of sap, and it failed miserably. But still, that wasn't nearly as bad as the next film, Child's Play. Holy Christ. The film, I guess, on its own isn't the worst, but the concept is just so stupid that it drove me crazy and it ruined it. I've discussed it before in a previous episode, but I will happily regurgitate briefly. This toy creator, it was of course made in, the Chucky doll was made in Japan, and he was being fired and he was depressed, so he unclicked a few default settings, and voila, that Chucky doll became a mass murderer. That's all it took. A couple clicks on a mouse. You know, in the original, the Charles Lee Ray character, he was a serial killer and he was dying, so he put his soul into a doll so he could live on. No, not in this one. Not in the remake. Just a couple clicks and then you got Charles Manson. And then we got number 3, High Life, Robert Pattinson. You know, I don't hate Robert Pattinson. I thought he was great in The Rover with Guy Pearce. If you haven't seen that film, that's a great film. But boy, this film, first 25 minutes, it's just him hanging out with a baby on a spaceship, speaking goo goo gaga talk. And then there's flashbacks of what happened and why it's just those two left on a ship, and it's the story that goes nowhere and is not interesting. And a film that I swear is still going on because it felt like it never ended. But those films were bad, but nothing compares to the 2 that I watched in the last couple days. Number 2, Perfect. Not to be confused with The Perfection, which was a good movie, a Netflix film. Perfect is on Shudder, a Shudder exclusive. I somehow watched the trailer. I don't remember how I stumbled across it, and it looked like a twisty, mind-bending, sci-fi, dark masterpiece. It's like, wow. Which is also how I got duped into High Life. I guess that should be a red flag. But Perfect. It's about this. I haven't discussed this film in a regular episode, so I'll cover it now so I don't ever have to mention it again. Perfect. This wealthy young man, I guess, kills his girlfriend, and he doesn't know why or remembers how. So his rich mother sends him off to like a retreat, like a rehab facility, and all these other people walking around half naked, and it's really hard to describe, but how do I describe this film? This is so stupid. He's trying to get better by trying to go deeper into his memory, and the deeper he goes, he kind of just regresses, and it kind of explains itself in the final scene, which was interesting but still not worthy. One of the reviewers compared it to a 90-minute underwear commercial, which is not far off. And the worst part of this film, there was a couple scenes of murmuring, like some of the characters would murmur with each other, but you weren't supposed to hear what they were saying. It was just I'm losing my mind. I'm trying to turn up the volume. Like, what are they saying? Am I supposed to be hearing this? Apparently not. That was just background noise. And a film with almost zero dialogue. When you finally do hear some dialogue, you want to hear it. You want to know what's going on. But I can't really explain much else about this film. There was nothing really to talk about. But this next film, there's plenty to talk about. The worst film of 2019 horror, Climax. What was so disappointing, this was on everyone's top 10 list. Every list of horror films so far, top 10 of the year, horror films you haven't seen of this year, everything, every list had this movie on it. And I thought, boy, this must be a can't-miss classic. Critic rating, 70%. Audience score is 67. Spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you this whole film in the next couple minutes here. You tell me if this sounds interesting to you. Climax is a French film, so it's in subtitles, so you have to read. First 10 minutes is one by one introducing the characters to you by showing them a snippet of an interview. They're like part of a dance troupe, I guess. And they're asking the cast people one by one, sometimes in twos, different questions. So it's like, okay, we're getting to know the characters. You know, you want to care for the characters, I guess. And then the next 10 minutes is this pointless dance scene where they all kind of do their thing, I guess. It's like, okay. Then the next 20 to 25 minutes is them, there's probably 20 of them, and they're all in this little studio, and they're all kind of paired off in twos, threes, and fours, and they're all having their own separate little conversations, and the camera goes from one to the other, to the other, to the other. It tries to make you think like it's all in one shot, but obviously it's not. And these conversations are just mindless. They're like high school, junior high conversations. Oh yeah, I'm gonna bone her, and oh yeah, so and so really likes me, and I think so and so has an STD. It's just mindless talk. And this goes on forever. So after 20 25 minutes of just listening in their conversations. And of course they're talking fast, so you have to read fast. So I'm reading at 100 miles an hour, trying to catch up and see if there's anything important, and here there's nothing. And then there's another goddamn dance scene, and it's shot from above, and they're all like in a circle, and like they all jump in and do their own special little dance, like a 20-30 second little special dance, and then they jump out, and then someone else, and each one of them does their little thing. So this is like, 10, 12 minutes of them just dancing. And then there's another 20 minutes of them just talking about nothing. And apparently, I guess there's this kind of like a party going on as they're doing all this, and they're drinking punch, and I guess the punch was laced with something or other. So an hour and 5 minutes into it, finally something starts to happen. And I'm praying and wishing, please, just have someone break in here and start killing all these people one by one. That would be great. Or I was hoping that they would all trip on whatever and just start eating each other. That would be great too. But that didn't happen, of course. And then in the beginning, I remember a lot of them were asked, what was your worst fear? So I was thinking, maybe they'll be forced to experience their worst nightmare. That was also the plot of Nightmare Cinema, which we'll be discussing later. But also, and that's not what happened. So they're tripping. Don't trip. Which is also a book I read on my channel, if you want to read that or listen to it, I guess. But so they're tripping on LSD or whatever, and one girl starts cutting herself. It's like, okay, this is a good start. When are they going to start killing each other and stabbing each other's eyeballs out and going crazy? No, nothing. Sometimes they would lock themselves in a little side room. Sometimes they would go off and fornicate with whomever. Sometimes they would pass out. And sometimes they would dance by themselves. And sometimes they would kind of just bounce off the walls. And that was this whole film. Talking, dancing, and then kind of tripping out for the last 20 minutes, even though nothing's really happening. And that was the whole film. That's on every critic's top 10 list, pretty much. Although there are silver critics that I will be quoting here that agree with me. This is from Ty Burr of the Boston Globe. He said, surprisingly, Hell turns out to be not very interesting when seen up close. And Climax is a bad trip that crashes before its characters do. Amen to that. Federico Ferzan says, arrogant cinema that feels artsy but fails when forming. I can't even read but fails when forming an arc for a logical storyline. Yes, thank you. There's not really a storyline. It's just arrogant cinema. That's, if someone comes up to you and says, you know what, you really need to see this Climax movie. It's really good. This is what you do. You stick your finger right in their face and you grit your teeth and you get close to them as possible and then say, you are a liar. You're stupid. That movie sucks. And so do you. Get out of my face. That's what you should do when someone says, you should watch this Climax movie. But enough of that. Let's move on to the next topic. My guilty pleasure of the year goes to a film I had almost zero expectations because it was a sequel and the first one sucked. My guilty pleasure of the year was 47 Meters Down Uncaged. The original was just a nothing basic shark attack movie, so I had low hopes for Uncaged. But the premise was basically there's this underground temple that's been sectioned off and flooded with water for hundreds and hundreds of years, and somehow this shark got down there, of course, and these young girls are exploring it and trying to, and this shark has never seen the light of day, so it's like a dirty, nasty albino shark with nasty red eyes, and it's all veiny and nasty, and it was hunting them down as, they were swimming around. It's not like this is an intelligent movie. It's not a smart movie. It doesn't have a lot of plot twists, but it's good, mindless fun. And that's why it wins my award for Best Guilty Pleasure of the Year. The honorable mentions of horror in 2019. I really want to focus on the top 5, but there's several that almost made the list that deserve to be mentioned at least somewhere in this. Going through them real quickly, The Perfection, which is a nice little Netflix movie. Not perfect. The Wind, which I reviewed a few episodes ago. Good possession film. Netflix's Fractured, that was fun. Hulu's original film, The Pledge, that was violent and fun. Nightmare Cinema, I really wanted to put it somewhere on this list, but it had to go. The Mickey Rourke movie. Girl on the Third Floor, starring pro wrestler CM Punk. The only thing that film really lacked was it needed a soundtrack. It was just too quiet and it didn't work. Another one, Rust Creek. That was a good little stalker film. Then one I watched very recently called I See You. There's a couple films with this name that came out this year, but this one is the one with Helen Hunt. Yes, Helen Hunt from Twister. She's still going. And the first half is one of those films where it shows you two different perspectives of the same event. First half was good. Second half, then the one that just missed out making the top 5 was The Vanishing. The Gerard Butler, from whom you might remember from 300. It's still working. The Vanishing was about the true story of 3 lighthouse keepers that vanished. Not to be confused with another film that came out this year called The Lighthouse, which is on another critics' top 10 list, which I thought was completely abysmal. But now to our top 5. Us. Us was a lot of fun. This family gets kind of duplicated and basically told we're going to eradicate you. There's nothing you can do about it. The Brightburn, kind of the anti-superhero. This was an unexpected good film. I thought it would be kind of superhero-ish, but not. But this was like a legit horror film. And I am looking forward to the sequels. The next one is a Hulu Into the Dark series film called They Come Knocking, about black-eyed children. Children who obviously have something wrong with them and are not of this world come knocking on your door. You do not answer. And this film shows why. The next one is The Furies. This was an extremely low-budget film. Basically, these women are kidnapped, and they're out in the woods, and they have all these crazy guys killing them, but each girl has one crazy stalker guy that's on their side and is trying to protect them. So the trick is to trying to find the guy that's on your side and kind of manipulate him. But don't want to give too much away, but that's on Shudder right now. That was really good. And then my final honorable mention was a film I watched very recently called Sweetheart, which is currently airing on Netflix. This was probably one of the best creature feature films I've seen since Dark Was the Night. This girl She gets shipwrecked with her group of friends, and they wash up to this little tiny island, and they are not alone. And things get crazy pretty quick, and it's only an hour and 20 minutes, so it goes fast, so it's good. So those are my honorable mentions. And now my top 10 horror films of 2019. Number 10, The Unwelcoming House 2. It should be called The Uncomfortable House. There's not one moment where you really feel comfortable in this house. It's a ghost hunting film. This guy's trying to figure out what's going on in this house. It's obviously haunted. And there's not a lot of jump scares, but there's never a moment where you feel like, okay, I'm at ease. Everything's okay. There's never that moment. It's always, what's going on? What's happening? What's that noise? A lot of good fun. There is going to be a third one, apparently, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm curious to see where it goes from here, but we will see. Number 9, The Headhunter. This was another one I watched very recently. Apparently, it was made on a minuscule budget with a small film crew, but it was amazing. I watched the whole thing with my mouth open, just flabbergasted at what was going on. Basically, this is set like in Game of Thrones, Willow times, in medieval wizardry times, stuff like that. And this guy's he's on his own in a little shack, and he's killing beasts, and it's great. That's all I can tell you. Number 8, Hole in the Ground. This was one I watched very early in the year and was briefly my number 1. This mother and 7-8-year-old son start over in a new place, and the kid goes out exploring in the yard, and they have acres and acres and acres, and there's this giant hole in the ground, and once he discovers this, he comes back home a little different, and mom realizes this and is like, what happened to my son? He's not the same. Excellent little film. Number 7, Head Count. I watched this in the summer, and this also was briefly going to be my number 1, but I watched probably another 30, 40 films after this, so unfortunately it did not stay number 1. But it was a very, very good film, Head Count. The only flaw with this film was the ending. Basically, this guy is hanging out with his brother, and he's out traveling. They're walking around in the desert, and he meets this group of people, and he befriends them and starts hanging out with them, and then things start getting weird. Like extra people. It's hard to explain without giving it away, but it's eerie. Number 6, Midsommar. This is one on a lot of people's lists, and actually this was really good. This group of friends go to where it was, somewhere Deutschland or where, I don't remember, Poland, I think, to see how their customs are, and surprise, surprise, their customs are strange, and things get crazy. Then where are we at? Number 5. Where are we at? Number 5, a Hulu Into the Dark original film, I'm Just Effing With You. This is, you ever have that friend where he plays a joke on you and you get mad at him and he says, dude, I'm just effing with you. Don't take it so serious. That's what happens in this one, but eventually the pranks get more and more out of control, and eventually he's doing stuff that really make you mad. And then what do? And that's what happens in this film. The bad guy is so amazing, so great. Number 4, a Netflix film called In the Shadow of the Moon. This detective is hunting down this young girl who's killing several people, and then she just vanishes. She vanishes for 10 years, and then comes back and starts to go on another killing spree. but she doesn't age. So the detective becomes obsessed with this case. Why is this girl popping up every 10 years? Why does she not age? And why is she killing random people that are seemingly innocent? Interesting little film. Number 3, Netflix's In the Tall Grass. Very basic film. This brother and sister pull over on their way to wherever, and they hear this boy out in the tall grass asking for help. So they jump in the tall grass and they try to find him, and they just get lost. And then night falls and things get strange. And then they hear other people, then they bump into other people, then they find this, that, and the other thing. And very, very eerie, very uncomfortable, but very good. Number 2, Beelzebub, currently on Shudder. If you want a free month of Shudder, use the promo code HMP. I have shockingly used this promo code 3 times this year, and they've let me use it each time, and each time I get a full free month. That's how I watch a lot of these films. But Beelzebub, I have reviewed this earlier on the show, on the previous one of my shows, and this film had a lot of kids being murdered. It starred Tobin Bell from the Saw series, and he was like a priest of sorts, and he was trying to stop the Antichrist. So they would kind of narrow it down to where they think the Antichrist was going to be living or coming from, so they would just wipe out all the kids in that area. Yep. But amazingly good. The last half was nuts. And now our number 1 film of the year, also on Shudder, a Shudder exclusive. This was Haunt, a haunted house film. It was one of those haunted house films where you pay, $10 or whatever, and you go in the house and people try to scare you. I've seen so many bad versions of this type of film that I was reluctant. But this film had 100% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So I thought, how bad can it be? And it was awesome. It was amazing. Damn near flawless. There's a little tiny bit of a lull in the middle, but other than that, it's beginning to end crazy. And that's why it gets number 1. My best picture of the year, Haunt. And there you have it. My best pictures, best to worst, and everything else. And that's it for this one. Thank you for listening.